You're listening to the Pulled by the Root podcast.
Hello, this is your host, Heidi Marble. I'm so glad you're here to listen to this episode with Abby Forero Hilty. I learned about Abby through Linnell Long. Linnell founded Intercountry Adoptee Voices. Linnell and I were discussing leadership when she made me aware of an article Abby wrote about leadership in the adoptee community for their organization. This conversation takes a deep dive into positive leadership and how we can strengthen each other. We also discuss the isolated grief adopted people feel and how grieving together can be so impactful. Before we take a listen, I wanted to let you know that I referenced a quote from Abby's article but did not give the author Vander Kolk the proper credit. He wrote "The body keeps the score." The quote reads, "Our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another." Enjoy this episode. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Heidi Marble. I am really excited to have Abby Forero Hilty with us today. She is an advocate. She's a transracial adoptee. She knows a great deal about leadership and healing, and I'm very excited to speak with her and share her conversation with you. Welcome, Abby.
Hi, Heidi. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here, Abby. Linnell actually sent me your blog, Leadership in the Intercountry Adoptee Community, that you published with your organization. And Linnell has been a wonderful source of strength and a mentor because she's been doing this for decades. So being able to have the opportunity to talk with well-established leaders in adoption land is really, really helpful. So before we get into all of your expertise, I think it would be really meaningful for people to understand your origin story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing whatever you feel comfortable sharing about how this all started.
Sure. So like you said earlier, I was born in Bogota, Colombia. I was adopted as an infant. I was only about 3 or 4 months old, adopted from one of the major orphanages. And I say that in quotation, in air quotes, because most children who go through the Colombian orphanages are not actually orphans. But yes, I was adopted from one of the major orphanages and grew up in a suburb of New York City as the only child in the family. In 2004, my first known relative, my son, was born. 4 years later, my second known relative, my daughter, was born. And then in 2012, I was fortunate enough to find my mom and the maternal side of my family in Colombia. So we have been reunited since then. And we have a really good relationship, even though there are many barriers, still in place, language barrier, geographic barrier, all kinds of barriers. But we do have the best relationship I think that we can have, despite the barriers. And I've been working in adoptee advocacy and adoptee rights advocacy for a number of years now. And like you said, gathered the voices of 17 Colombian adoptees to put together our anthology. And that is probably like my greatest source of pride in terms of the work that I've done in the adoption community.
Thank you for sharing that, Abby. So I'd like to drill a little deeper because adoption impacts all of us so deeply. And when did you always know that you were an adopted person? When did you kind of have a reckoning with it? And if you can lead us into how you came to advocacy, what was it inside of you that drew you to serve?
I've always known. I don't have any memory of being sat down and told by my adoptive parents that I was adopted. I've always just known it. It was an open fact in our family. It wasn't hidden. It wasn't covered up. I think it couldn't have been because I didn't look like them, but also, it wasn't a taboo topic, but it also wasn't a topic that was addressed, I would say, in any sort of deep emotional way. So I think all of as a child, I had a lot of sadness because I really missed my mother in Colombia. I wanted to know who she was, when she was going to come and get me, where she was, why this happened. So she was always present, at least within me, even if we didn't talk about her a lot in my family. She was always with me. And so I think even as a child, I was always in some way in search mode, right? Even just, I mean, the most basic of basics, which I think you hear from a lot of other adoptees, is you just walk down the street and you're always looking at people, especially for me, it was women, potential like, oh, could that be my mom? Or could that be my mom? You know, things like that probably don't really make sense, but you're always in search mode, right? So I would say from very early on, I was in search mode. I would say also from very early on, I was in grief mode. I remember crying a lot, being really sad that I didn't have her, that I didn't have any knowledge of my family. So I guess that it was just always there. When I was finally able to study a second language in junior high school, I think we were required to take a second language. Of course, I chose Spanish because that was going to lead me to reunion, right? That was going to help me when I did finally find her. And I was always convinced that I would find her. Maybe it was a naive, just naive voice speaking. I didn't realize back then the challenges of finding somebody, especially in intercountry adoption, which has a lot of corruption involved most of the time. There was no internet back then, of course, so there was no community to really connect with. So I just kind of always had that belief that I would find her someday, and I was very fortunate to do that. And once I found my mom and the maternal side of my family, a lot of emotional space that had been tied up in search, in grief, was finally, at least to some extent, set free. So then I had more room, more emotional space, I think, for advocacy and really recognizing that adoption didn't just affect my life. It's not just a unique experience to me, even though we all have our unique lived experiences, of course, but it's a system that is, it's an industry and it affects millions of people. And really seeing the bigger picture of the number of women it affects who lose their children to adoption, and the number of adult adoptees who are walking around now, really made me want to do something for the benefit of our community and to try to reunite families, which doesn't make somebody unadopted. It doesn't finish everything. It doesn't fix all of our pain, but it is something that we can do, that we can empower ourselves to do, to at least search and to admit that we're searching, and to hopefully have a successful reunion in whatever that means for the individual, and to do that with support. So I guess that's what really led me into adoption or adoptee-centric advocacy.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said about the emotional space being freed up. Wow. That was just a beautiful thing to think about, that finding answers, it doesn't solve the pain, but it creates more space. And that you moved outside of your own pain to the larger issue. And a lot of us are out there, and we want very much to impact this. And your ideas about leadership, to me, are very profound, Abby, as I'm trying to discover my place in this world and how I can best support our guests and lift up their voices. And one of the things that I'm concerned about as a podcaster, we are all victims, honestly, of this horrible thing, if you define it that way. Mm-hmm. I have admitted many times that victim coat that I zip up and button up tight and belt on, boy, that feels pretty comfortable. But it shrinks your life and it collapses your power. And so one of the most important questions I want to ask you is, how do we honor the pain that's happened and help guide people toward a more powerful stance?
And I think that's a really good question. I think it's okay to recognize that what we lived through does cause pain, that it's not something that you get over. It's not a one-time event. It's something that literally, you know, when you lose your mother at birth or in early childhood, there is a rewiring of some parts of the brain. So there's actually like physical changes that we undergo. And I think it kind of sets the tone for a lot of, you know, for the rest of your life in many areas of your life. And that doesn't mean that, you know, you're doomed to this horrible life. It just means that you're starting from a different place than people who remain within their biological families. And so I think honoring that pain and allowing it to come out and not to be ashamed of it and not to hold it back is really important. To be allowed to grieve. When people lose a loved one, nobody tells them not to cry. Nobody tells them not to be sad, right? That we have funerals. I mean, every culture has ceremonies, you know, and how they display grief, and it's a communal thing normally, right? We don't grieve alone most of the time. When we lose somebody, there is a gathering of people who come around to grieve with you and to witness your grief and to share. And when you are an adoptee, I feel like you are forced to grieve alone. You don't have that communal grief around you. You don't have people saying, I understand, and I also am sad, and we're going to do this together, and we're going to get through this together. So I feel that, you know, when you're growing up as an adoptee, you're doing that by yourself, and that is not, I don't know, that's difficult. It's very difficult. Maybe it's not very healthy, but it's what you have. It's what you can do. And I think, you know, grief doesn't ever end completely. I think it just changes. And yes, the victimhood jacket, like you said, it's always with you. It's always there. Sometimes it's nice. It's what you have to fall back on. It's what you've always known. But I think as we grow up and we are fortunate enough, hopefully, to be in community with other people, then maybe we realize we don't really need that. And we can transition from victimhood or from victim to survivor and to thriver, and to be able to recognize that many people also go through the same thing, and we can go through it together. We can have that collective grief, even though maybe it's displaced in time by 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but we can do that together, which helps to get through it. And yeah, I think by supporting each other, then no one has to continue to go through that alone. So that, at least for me, helped to, you know, get into more of a survivor, and then, yeah, maybe thriver mode, in the fact that, you know, you were a victim, you've survived it, and now you can thrive by honoring your grief and honoring the grief of other people, and also helping them to channel that into something positive, you know, like a podcast. Or, I mean, adoptees do everything. They paint, they sculpt, they act, they sing. I mean, there's so many ways to channel all of that. So I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
What you said about grieving alone, it just put a tear in my heart, not in a bad way, like it was an opening. I never really considered the aloneness in that process of grieving something we don't fully understand.
Mm-hmm.
And just putting it in the context of community and thinking about how we do honor our griefs in different ways, and that adoptees don't have that, but we do now in each other as a community. Wow, that was, gosh, I have to take a deep breath after that. Whew, okay. So that leads me to our community. I am new. I am coming in and watching and observing and listening and looking and reading and gathering. And there is so much love and support, Abby. But there's also a side that is very frightening to me, where I see us kind of turning on each other in certain areas. And I've had a little bit of that, and I understand it, and I try to respect it. But I really don't know what to do about it. I think what I want to do is very simplified. I just want to say, listen, we don't all have to agree, but we need each other. Can we come to some respectful agreement that all voices can be heard? But that is not realistic. We're human beings.
Yeah, no,
it's messy. So I know you guys have such a beautiful organization, and you've been dealing with all these issues.
I mean, I think that, we all have been through trauma, and then some behaviors that we have are trauma responses. And it's hard, I think, definitely when we're younger, at least for me, it was hard to recognize those behaviors as trauma responses. Now, I do recognize them. However, that doesn't mean I can get rid of them. I was just talking to my husband today about that, and we were speaking about being a perfectionist and an overachiever. And I said, well, yeah, that's part of my trauma response. I know that it is. And as a child, I didn't recognize that going through schooling, but I feel like now I recognize it, and I try to let it go. And I really, really consciously do not put that on my children, right? That pressure that I put on myself. But yeah, I think to recognize that we have all been through trauma, and we all have behaviors that are trauma responses, and that even though maybe we started with a similar story and that we lost our families, my trauma response behaviors may be different from yours, may be different from somebody else's. And that we're all coming into this, like you said, with 1 year experience, with 1 day experience, with 10 years of experience. It's different. And no matter how long I'm in the adoptee community, I'm constantly learning too. So in a way, I feel like we're all here for the first time every day. There's always so much to learn. And I think it's okay to say no, and to say, you know what, I understand that we're coming at this from different places, or we're coming at this with different responses to something, but I can't abide by that behavior. Or, I need to just distance myself from this situation, because for me right now, it's not healthy. And maybe for the other person, it's not healthy that I'm there. Or so there is infighting sometimes, which is sad, but I understand it. And I feel like, you know what, you have to let people, I don't know, do what they're going to do their way. And you can either choose to be involved with those things because they're healthy and supportive, or you can choose not to be if you need to be outside of that situation.
Very well said. And one of the notes from your writing, trauma can impact our leadership abilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
the trauma response, that really resonates with me. Really something to think about.
I think it can also have a positive impact. It can make you more able to understand and recognize that in other people, and understand that that's where they're coming from. If you don't have that trauma background, you might not be able to empathize as much or to understand as much. So I think in some ways it can hinder us as leaders, but in other ways it can help to create more empathy as well.
In your blog, you said validating. And leadership at its finest is going to empower, support, and influence without direct power and authority. Love that. Because it's not fear-driven. And I think as an adopted person, there's so much fear that lives in us about being rejected. We can be motivated without already pushing down us. That feels really, really amazing to me. And I just wonder if you can elaborate on the servant leadership. Because when I first hear the word servant, I'm like, I'm not a servant. I get a little, but I think we need to define what that means in its pure form.
So for me, I think it means recognizing that we're all in community, and that as leaders, I feel like we lead best when we serve our community members, right? Because we're not just helping ourselves. We're helping everyone collectively. And I think when one person gets support, that brings support to everybody, because one person who feels supported is going to be able to feel better about themselves and, have maybe a healthier interaction with other people in their lives. And I feel like you spread that positivity within your community. So it's not about having power over other people. It's about empowering everybody, because when you lift up part of the community, then the rest of it also gets lifted up as well.
And I have the servant leadership checklist, and I'm just going to read through it really quickly. Self-aware, humble, integrity, result-oriented, foresight, listen, doesn't abuse authority, intellectual authority, collaboration, trusting, coach, resolve conflict.
That's like a lot to live up to. And we all do our best where we are today at this moment with the tools and the resources that we have. And again, it comes back to that, nobody's perfect. And, you can be this overachiever, but it doesn't mean, I think that we're never trying to live up to everything all at once, right? We're trying to improve where we are now to be better, community members and be better servant leaders. And it's always things to aspire to and to work on.
For sure. I think this could work in my marriage too. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think it works in every relationship, right?
Well, Abby, to put you on the spot a little with the leadership, is there a memory you have about a time when you were struggling with it? And on the opposite side of that, a time when it felt so incredible and that you saw something happen because of leadership?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, struggle is always self-belief. So even if, when I initially had the idea for the Colombian anthology, and in our Facebook group, Adopted from Colombia, I just kind of put out a general message saying, I have this idea. I would love to help put together a Colombian anthology. It would be written by, edited by, published by, and written for the Colombian community, right? So really, an in-house project, zero budget. Who wants to get in on this with me? Like, it doesn't sound very enticing, like you're not going to get paid, but please pour your soul out and we'll have a good time doing it. And then I was amazed that people came forward. Some of the people I had known previously, and some of them I had never even heard of them, because, you have these Facebook groups, you have a couple hundred or a couple thousand people in there. And inevitably you have the people who speak up all the time, and you have people who are quieter, who just listen and they learn, and you don't hear from them. And so suddenly I had these people, some of whom I didn't even recognize their names, but they were willing to kind of get on board with this project. And we formed this global group. We were on different continents and different time zones. So for me, that was really inspiring to know that people were willing to put their trust, not just in me, but in everybody, because we were all going to be reading each other's work. And then we were all going to be putting this book out to the world, right? So people were going to be reading about these intimate feelings and thoughts that we each had. So that was super inspiring, but it's also, challenging along the way to be like, why are they trusting me? What did I do? And what if I fail them? And what if, the book doesn't get published? What if it's not a success? What if we can't get enough money to buy DNA kits? What if we don't reunite families? So there's always those nagging self-doubt, what ifs. And for me, that is the biggest struggle in especially in a leadership position, because then I feel like I am responsible, not just for what happens to me, but I'm responsible for the collective. I've invited these people into this space and I cannot fail them, because it's I have to look out for them too and protect them. So yeah, it is totally a double-edged sword, like you said. Absolutely.
Oh, Abby, I can so relate to that. It's one thing to let yourself down, but it's an entirely different ball game when you have people that trust you. And I understand that so deeply. The other side of it, though, is you have a book that exists. and it's beautiful. And so it all came to be in spite of those doubts. So I'm so glad that you're able to push through and create something amazing and be able to give people an opportunity to share. So I'm
Thank
happy
you.
that happened.
A lot of it was, inspired by seeing everybody working so hard, and that, that of course pushes you through any self-doubt when you see everyone around working so hard. So yeah, that was great.
Well, another challenge, Abby, that I'd love to talk to you about, and I'm sure you've been through this, especially if you have the perfectionistic tendencies. This has been such an intense experience for me that I am confessing how exhausting it can be. I'm adoption obsessed. It's all I do, all I think about. And I believe you and I discussed a little bit that you need those spaces in between to take in some deep breaths and to do something different so that you can remain strong. Can you talk about how you've been able to balance that to a very unbalanced person right now?
Yeah, I think it's always there, right? It never fully goes away, even when you say, I'm going to take a break from it today. It's always part of you. And I feel like there are daily reminders in really basic human interactions. You can, maybe there's a new colleague starting at work and your team is doing some sort of like getting to know you game. And it's always like, oh, do you have brothers and sisters? And already like I'm triggered because I'm like, well, okay, I grew up as an only child. So do I say I'm an only child? Or on the other hand, I know that I have at least 4 siblings. Do I get into that? But that's like a weird, story in terms of, so I feel like there's something always that's there, even if you consciously say to yourself, you know what, I'm not going to go on any social media today. I'm not going to check in with any adoption groups. I'm not going to read an adoptee memoir. I'm really like having a break from it. But then I feel like there's always something that kind of brings it up, even when you aren't looking out for it. So there's that. But then, I don't know, for me, it's being out in nature, being in a forest, being in a kayak on the water somewhere, being with my children and my husband, being together with this really, really small group of people, right? Just total the 4 of us and people who know my whole story. I'm not going to get any unexpected questions. They already know everything anyway. It's an open story. So there's nothing that I can say that would be like, oh, I shouldn't have said that. There's no slip ups. So totally at ease with these people, with my people, and just, having a day with them, not in front of a screen and just, out somewhere in nature, being together. That helps me a lot to take a break. And just say, you know what, I can even take a week break if I'm on vacation. I can say, I don't need to engage in the adoptee community all day, every day. And I don't need to respond to every message within 3 seconds. I can also say to somebody, I saw your message, assuming it's not a crisis. Let me get back to you. I'm away for a few days. I need a break. And I think that's not only acceptable, I think that's healthy. I think everybody needs a break and should take that break.
So I want to circle back to your blog and read a quote. It says, our capacity to destroy one another is matched by our capacity to heal one another. Restoring relationships and community is central to restoring well-being. We can change social conditions to create environments in which children and adults can feel safe and where we can thrive. I just love that because the capacity to destroy or heal exists so closely together. So what can you speak out to the varied group of people that are listening in, Abby, that want to see things get better, want to progress in healing, in their own leadership, even? And what I tell people and what I feel deeply is that not everyone has to have a podcast or do all of these. It can be the smallest thing I don't want people to be intimidated that they can't impact things. It all counts. Everything counts.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. When you think about how, I don't know, how any family or group of people or company or business operates, right? You have people in different positions and they're all doing something and it's all meaningful, right? It's all, someone has to buy the vegetables and someone has to chop them up and someone has to cook them and then someone has to clean the dishes, right? And sometimes it's all one person, but a lot of times, and it's much easier when it's a lot of people sharing that work. So I think, like you said, everything is important. And also, I think it's important to recognize that certain mediums will be easier for certain people to resonate, to like that resonate with people. Like some people feel more comfortable watching a film. Some people prefer to read a book. It gives them more time to digest the information. Maybe they want to make notes or take notes, so they need to have that, you know, something in their hands. Some people want to listen to a podcast. Some people want to engage in like a local support group. So I think that there's so many different avenues that we can all find ways to impact our community. And like you said, they don't have to be huge. They can be small. And I think even just connecting with one other adoptee, maybe somebody's having a down day or something, right? And they reach out to you and you're that person who, you know, chats with them and listens to what they have to say and validates what they're going through and does whatever it is that they need to feel better, right, in that moment. And I think all of that adds up and it's all meaningful to me, at least. Like I appreciate the efforts that so many people who are adopted are making, who have done trauma work or who are currently doing trauma work, who are, you know, addressing those very real, not rainbows and unicorns issues in adoption. And there's so many avenues that people follow. And I think the most important thing is that you do what's in your heart, right? What's in your gut. If it tells you, you know, that you need to write music, that you need to write poetry, that you need to be on a stage, that you need to have a podcast, whatever you need to do to get that out and to be creative with what you've been through and to reach other people, I think that all adds up. And it's a huge thing.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And the things that I see online, it's just this beautiful, like giant bouquet of flowers, just the variety. And it's just visually so beautiful to see what people are doing to contribute to their own healing and to the healing of others. I also love the ICAV website. You have all of the resources and you create space for people to express as well. Before we go, Abby, can you tell us how you got involved with that organization and what it means to you? I'd love for people to be able to know more about it.
Yeah, so ICAV, Intercountry Adoptee Voices, is run by Linnell Long. She's an intercountry adoptee from Vietnam and she lives in Australia. Honestly, I don't remember now how I got involved with them. I don't remember. I'm guessing that somebody in my Adopted from Colombia group years ago must have mentioned, oh, here are some other resources outside of our specific community if people are interested. But honestly, I don't remember. So it must have happened rather organically. Linnell is a complete and utter powerhouse, and she's amazing. And the amount of resources that she provides to us and the way that she creates space for everyone in the community globally. And like really globally, there's, you know, articles in so many different languages even, right? And just so many different topics, and the respect that she gives to all different points of view within the adoptee world is amazing. So yeah, it means a lot to me to be involved in that because I think it's great to have a community, especially as a transracial intercountry adoptee, I really appreciate my Colombian adoptee community, because I feel like there are things that we can discuss in there that aren't necessarily applicable to other to either domestic adoptees or even to other intercountry adoptees from different countries, because each country has their own system of paperwork and finding things out. And, there's so many intricacies, I think, to each individual country. So it's invaluable to have that group. But on the other hand, I think there's always that broader perspective that's important to realize that, there are other adoptees, both domestic and international, same race and transracial. And it's important to have, for me, to have that broader view and to be in that broader community of adoptees, because like I said, I feel like every day, no matter how long I've been here, I'm learning something new. Every day is like my first day, not in a bad way, just in a way that I'm constantly learning from other voices. And so that I love her organization, and being one of the Canadian representatives for that, it really means a lot to me, so that people know that they can reach out, and we're here. So I really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you, Abby, for telling us more about how you feel about ICAV. It's a very special organization. So, Abby, as we wrap things up, is there anything else that you would like to say? Anything we might have missed regarding your own personal journey or leadership that you'd like to end with?
I think it's important for all adopted people to know that they are not alone. And I think any of the thoughts or feelings that they may have inside that they haven't spoken about are real and are valid, and are, a response to what happened to them, not a response to who they are, or that they're, that they're broken or anything like that. I think it's just, we came from a system that is broken, and that's what needs to be really dismantled. I don't think you can fix it. But we as people are not that system, right? We are individuals, and we are not alone. And there's a wonderful community of people out there who are kind of in the trenches every day, right? Doing the work and talking about their pain, talking about their struggles, talking about the positive outcomes of everything that they've lived through and learned. So to me, that's the most important thing is community, and just knowing that I'm not alone, and nobody else in our community is alone either.
That's a beautiful way to end, Abby. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
Thank you, Heidi, for having me.